All right, let's jump right in, because this is a truly fascinating story. We're going to talk about how this ancient, super complex, and honestly pretty secret spiritual tradition just completely transformed. I mean, it went from being locked away in hidden libraries to being out in the open, celebrated with songs, stories, and this incredible new focus on pure joy.
So yeah, that's the big question, right? How on earth did a mystical tradition, one that was basically reserved for a handful of scholars, become this huge worldwide spiritual movement that's all about song and story? I mean, how does an exclusive club suddenly open its doors to everyone? It's an amazing story of a total radical shift.
Okay, so to really get a grip on this revolution, we have to go back. We have to understand what things were like before, and that means we need to step into this hidden spiritual world, the world of what's called Kabbalah.
And this idea of a locked room is it's the perfect way to think about Kabbalah for centuries. Seriously, this stuff wasn't just hard to understand, it was intentionally kept under wraps. You couldn't just decide to study it. You had to be a male scholar, married, over 40, and you had to have already mastered a huge amount of Jewish law. It was like the spiritual equivalent of climbing Mount Everest, blindfolded.
So you're probably wondering, what was actually in that locked room? Well, Kabbalah. And at its heart, it was this super deep, really intellectual thing. The best way to think about it is like the spiritual blueprint for the entire universe. It was all about trying to understand the mechanics of creation, the hidden nature of God, all through this incredibly intense study of sacred texts. This was a total head trip, diving into the most abstract ideas you can even think of.
And when I say complex, I mean really complex. You were dealing with ideas like the Sephirot, which are these 10 divine attributes or energies, or Tikkun Olam, this huge cosmic idea of repairing the world. Then you had gematria, a kind of mystical numerology. And you had to tackle the Zohar, the main text, which is so dense and cryptic it makes quantum physics look like a bedtime story. Yeah, this was definitely not a weekend hobby.
And then everything changed. Out of nowhere, in the 18th century, something new exploded onto the scene, and it didn't come from the big scholarly centers. It came from the small towns and villages of Eastern Europe, places that often knew a lot about hardship and poverty. There was this deep, deep hunger for a connection to God that was more personal, more immediate, and more joyful. And that spiritual explosion, that was the birth of Hasidism.
I mean, just look at this timeline. You can really see how wild this shift was. For hundreds of years, Kabbalah is just quietly doing its thing, developing among these small circles of elite scholars. Then, bam, the 1700s hit, and Hasidism just shows up. And the amazing thing is, it didn't throw out the old stuff. It just reframed it. It took all those high-level, complex ideas and found a way to make them feel alive and relevant for everyday people.
And this right here, this quote, it just gets to the absolute heart of it all. Hasidism didn't try to pick the lock on that old, complicated room. The Baal Shem Tov, the movement's founder, he wasn't trying to teach everybody the secret codes of Kabbalah. Nope. Instead, he just built a brand new door, a huge, wide-open door that absolutely everyone was invited to walk through.
So, what was this new door all about? Well, it was a totally different way of doing things. It was a shift from the quiet, lonely scholar to the lively, community-focused storyteller.
Let's break it down. Kabbalah, that was all about intense intellectual study, usually done alone. Hasidism, on the other hand, was all about emotional experience shared with your community. The tools changed too. Instead of these super dense, hard-to-read texts, you had simple, powerful stories and songs that anyone could connect with. And the goal? It wasn't just about knowing stuff, it was about feeling a connection, something called devekut, this joyful sense of being close to God. And the biggest deal of all? Access was thrown wide open. It wasn't for the elite few anymore, it was for everyone.
So how'd they pull this off? It really came down to three big ideas. First, they put the heart front and center. The thinking was that a simple, honest prayer from someone with no formal education could be way more powerful than some complicated meditation from a scholar. Second, they found holiness in everyday life. You didn't have to be in a synagogue to connect with God. It could happen while you were working, eating a meal, or even dancing. And third, they built everything around the community and a spiritual leader, the Rebbe, whose job was to take all these big ideas and make them real and practical for people's lives.
And look, this isn't just some dusty old history lesson. This revolution is still going on. Its impact is alive and well, shaping spiritual life today, all over the world.
When you boil it all down, this is what happened. Hasidism took the head, that is, the deep, brilliant intellectual ideas of Kabbalah, and it gave it a heart, a passionate, emotional, accessible heart. It didn't get rid of the old wisdom, it just gave it a new soul, a new energy.
And you really can see its legacy everywhere you look. You've got these incredibly vibrant Hasidic communities all over the world, like Chabad or Breslov. You see it in how central song and story have become in so many modern Jewish services. And you know what? Even when you hear about Kabbalah in popular culture today, a lot of that is because this movement was the one that first took mysticism out of that locked room and brought it out into the light for everyone to see.
So that kind of leaves us with a final thought to chew on. You know, we live in a world that can feel pretty complex, pretty overwhelming sometimes. So what can we take away from a spiritual revolution that happened 300 years ago? A revolution that said, hey, the deepest truths aren't just hidden in ancient books for scholars. They're right here, waiting for you in a simple song, in a meal you share with friends, in a moment of pure joy.